Good evening, students. Today I'm going to discuss with you an important topic, that is abatement of suicide. Now, abatement of suicide has been discussed in various facets, but today we will limit ourselves to the discussion as to when you find a suicide note with the deceased or the body of the deceased, how relevant is it in context of establishing the offense of abatement of suicide? And do you still have to establish other facets, or is the suicide note independently sufficient? So without wasting time, we will go towards the case law. This is a recent judgment, and the name of the case is Patel Babubhai Mohandas versus State of Gujarat. Now, what happens in this particular case is that the accused receive a conviction for abatement in the lower court. They approach the high court, and the decision is not interfered with by the high court, and therefore now this particular incident, this case has reached the highest court. And in context of what was the background of the case, what happens in this incident is that the wife of the deceased, she is basically working and leaves for her work, for the work that he has been appointed to, and there she is informed that her mother-in-law has taken ill. When she reaches home, she finds a large crowd at home, and her husband is lying unresponsive, and then it is realized that he has died. So, what is relevant to note at this point is that there is a conflicting scenario that is put forth to us. The wife also informs that after set of days pass, a few days pass, the elder brother of the deceased comes to her and tells her that he found a note, a suicide note, on the body of the deceased, and this note gives some information regarding to why he committed the suicide or why he has consumed poison. Now, what is the narration, or whatever is the perspective which is given by the wife, is that there was misappropriation done by her husband, and that was at his workspace, and for which reason he was suspended. Now, the reason he committed this act of misappropriation of money is because that he had become intimate by with one individual named Geeta Ben, who is one of the accused here, and this Geeta Ben had recorded some vulnerable photographs and videos of him, which she was using and blackmailing him in that context and taking money from him. And for which reason, and under that pressure, he had committed the act of misappropriation. And this was something which the wife was aware that was creating pressure on him, and he had also been suspended from his workspace. Now, the court hints at one thing as we go ahead in our discussion, that whatever is the interaction, whatever may have been the pressure that has been put by Geeta Ben and the associated accused in this case, it doesn't seem to have been something which really directly caused the suicide of the individual. The court hints at one thing. It states that it may be, even if it is presumed that they were trying to harass him, blackmail him for money, there doesn't seem to be an intention to cause him to commit suicide. What we want to prove is that the circumstance was such, the incidents, the acts that were committed by these accused were such that this individual felt that he had no other option than to commit suicide. And the court also hints that there was no particular incident proximate to the death which could link it as the causation of the suicide. Right. So these are a couple of hints which the court, in its statement in this para, provides for. It also states that this particular suicide note is not immediately informed to the police. they take 20 days to inform the police. There is also a lot of gray area as to who found the suicide note and with whom was the suicide note. One thing which has been confirmed is that initially it was not with the wife. She received it after a couple of days. It was informed to the police after a few more days. And the court states that this also creates some kind of gray area in context of how uh, plausible it is to think that the suicide note is authentic. The authenticity of this note comes into picture. So the court at this point also mentions section 306 for abatement and states that under 306 you can be penalized, and in that context imprisonment up to 10 years, which can extend to 10 years, can be applied to an individual. And it states that if any person commits suicide, then whoever abates the commission of such suicide is punishable for abatement of suicide. And for this purpose, we must understand the term abatement under section 107 of IPC, which states that a person would be abating the doing of a thing if he instigates any person to do that thing, or if he encourages with one or more persons in any conspiracy for doing that thing, or if he intentionally aids by any act or illegal omission the doing of that thing. There are two explanations to this section. Explanation 1 states that even if a person, by way of willful misrepresentation or concealment of a material fact, which he is otherwise bound to disclose, voluntarily causes or procures or attempts to cause or procure a thing to be done, is said to instigate the doing of that thing. And explanation 2 clarifies that whoever does anything in order to facilitate the commission of an act, either prior to or at the time of the commission of the act, is said to aid the doing of that act. So, abatement requires aid the doing of this particular act. You encourage that a particular situation transpires, takes place, right? And that can also be done with the help of more than one person. So now, when we come back to the definition of abatement of suicide, it requires that there is some kind of urging, there is some kind of goading on behalf of this individual for it to culminate to the suicide of the deceased. The landmark case of Ramesh Kumar versus State of Chhattisgarh has also been referred in the case, and the court re-emphasizes that instigation means to goad, urge, provoke, incite, or encourage to do an act to satisfy the requirement of instigation. It is not necessary that there is the use of actual words, but must be used to that effect, or that the words or act should necessarily and specifically be suggestive of the consequence, where the accused by his act or omission or by his continued course of conduct creates a situation that the deceased is left with no other option except to commit suicide, instigation may be inferred. What is relevant to note that we have to establish the mens rea that you wanted a certain outcome that can be achieved by either by directly proving that you goaded, urged, or provoked an act, or you continuously create a situation, you continuously commit a form of conduct where this individual feels that they have no other option but to commit suicide. That has to be established by you, and it cannot simply be a mere sentence or a phrase said in a fit of anger. It has to be something which has been intended, or which has in the second circumstance been in a situation where you are repeatedly creating a conduct or situation where the person feels that they have no option but to commit suicide. The court has summed it up in the case of Chitresh Kumar Chopra that when a person is said to instigate, it means You keep on irritating or annoying the deceased by words, deeds, or willful omissions or conduct, which may even be a willful silence until the deceased reacted or pushed or forced the deceased to his deeds, words, or willful omissions or conducts to make the disease move forward towards that direction. So you create the circumstance, you create an irritation or annoyance which leads to the this diseased feeling that he has or she has no other option. He must have the intention to provoke, urge, or encourage the deceased, and there must be undoubtedly the presence of mens rea to instigate that particular individual. In Amalendu Pal versus State of West Bengal, the court has reiterated the fact that there must be proof of direct or indirect acts of incitement to the commission of suicide. It is important to note that you must incite suicide. Harassment is a separate thing, and to directly or indirectly incite a person to commit suicide is a different matter altogether. Even if we feel that Geeta Ben may have harassed this particular individual, the deceased, it is not equal to the fact, it doesn't in itself or inherently become that she abated the suicide. It has to be shown that what she did was directly or indirectly for the purpose or was an incitement for him to commit suicide, or it was such a circumstance that he felt that he had no other option but to commit suicide. Merely an allegation of harassment without there being any positive action proximate to the time of occurrence on the part of the accused, which led or compelled the deceased to commit suicide. Conviction in terms of section 306 IPC in such cases will not be sustainable. So, proximity with the crime, with the death that takes place, and committing an act which directly links to the death of an individual is very relevant, is very necessary for an allegation under section 306, that is abatement of suicide. The court reiterates it in para 22. It states that abatement to commit suicide involves a mental process of instigating a person or intentionally aiding a person in the doing of a thing without a positive proximate act on the part of the accused to instigate or aid in committing suicide, conviction cannot be sustained. Besides, in order to convict a person under 306 of IPC, there has to be clear mens rea to commit the offense. So the court has reiterated in this decision that you must establish that there is something proximately done with the main agenda that you want the person to commit suicide. In this set of circumstances that are brought forth to us, what is established that maybe yes, Geeta Ben and the deceased had a relationship which may have led for some demands of money, but that does not in itself mean that she incited and created a proximate incident which led to his death. She may have harassed, but that in itself is not equal to an act of abatement of suicide or to bring her under the ambit of abatement of suicide. Finally, we also see that in context of the inconsistencies that are there in this particular incident, in context of the wife saying that when she came in, she saw a crowd and her husband was um, lying down and was non-responsive. At another point, she has also mentioned that when she came home, her husband had already been taken to the hospital. So there is an inconsistency in her testimony. There is no clarity, and the fact that the veracity of her statements can be trusted upon then comes into question because she's consistently conflicting whatever she is saying. Another conflicting issue that came up in this case was that the two brothers of the deceased, one brother said that his niece had come up to him and told him that her father is not responding. And when he reached the spot, the elder brother was present. And on the other hand, the elder brother has made a statement that the younger brother had come to his house and had informed him about the incident, and then they had collectively gone towards the house of the deceased. So there are conflicting statements that are coming from the younger and elder brother also. Again, in context of the fact that the note was found, the brothers have conflicting testimonies in context of that also. Now, what does this suicide note contain? It contains the fact that this female had entered into a relationship with the deceased. The deceased has made a statement in the note that she had used some form of black magic in order to induce him into the intimacy, subsequently had taken photographs and videos in compromising positions, and therefore had started blackmailing him. He had initially paid a certain amount of money, had also signed checks, and also provided his passbook and so on, and also was forced to misappropriate money from this office, which has led him to commit suicide. So, this is what the note provided, but the fact that there was no proximate act on behalf of the accused, the group of accused, also the fact that even if we consider the authenticity of the note, it doesn't in itself create a situation where you can say that it incited this accused incited the individual to commit suicide. The court states that even if we consider the suicide note as genuine, we do not find any act of incitement on the part of the appellant proximate to the date at which the deceased committed suicide. No act is attributed to the appellant proximate to the time of suicide, which was of such nature that the deceased was left with no alternative but to commit suicide. In these circumstances, it cannot be said to be a case of abatement of suicide. So we see that even if we presume that the suicide note is considered to be authentic, there is no proximate act which is an incitement for the individual to commit suicide, and therefore the allegation of abatement of suicide cannot survive. I hope that I have made some kind of or brought some kind of clarity to the concept of abatement suicide. In short, we end with the fact that even if there is a suicide note, if you are not able to establish that the accused at a proximate time to the incident had committed an act which would incite the suicide, it will not lead to a charge or an the offense of abatement of suicide being established against such an accused. Thank you, students.